Welcome to my channel, Custom Scrapbook designed by Christy Stubbs. For this video, I am actually going to do the tutorial for my Bloom and Grow mini album, and it measures 4x6. I do have a full walkthrough video up. I will link that down below, so I'm not actually going to walk through this again. You will see me reference back to it a couple times because we are going to recreate this, and I'm going to give you the tutorial on how it was made. So bear with me, I haven't done very many tutorials, so we'll see how well I do with this. I'm also not good at like preparing and planning in advance, and I have tried to do that, so we'll see how that works out. So let's just dive right into the tutorial for this book. For this, you are going to need some pieces of chipboard, and your chipboard, you will need 2 pieces that measure 4x6, and then you're also going to need a piece that measures 1x6. So I have already covered one of my chipboard pieces. And to cover those, you're going to need cardstock to wrap that. And so you will need 2 pieces of cardstock that measure 6x8, and then one that measures 4x8 for the spine. So let's go ahead and wrap the one 4x6 sheet that I have already done. And to do that, I went ahead and put my adhesive on the back. And I usually use a tape adhesive to wrap the covers with. And so I've already put that on my chipboard piece. Then I will pull out my scoreboard. And I've got my 6x8 piece of paper already cut. And then I have some handy little spacers that I use. And if you don't have these, you can cut yourself a piece of 1-inch chipboard to use. This just makes lining everything up a lot easier for you. So you line 1 inch up on the left hand side and then 1 up at the top. And then what that does, I'll place it this way so hopefully you can see it a little bit better, is gives you a 1-inch wrap all the way around there. So we'll get those in place and peel off the backing to this tape. And then I just place that down. And then you've got a nice little 1-inch frame all the way around your chipboard. So the next step would be to burnish that tape down and make sure you've got a nice tight adhesion. And then I take and I use that chipboard to fold and score the paper all the way around your chipboard piece. And then once you get all 4 sides bent over and scored, you're gonna see that you've got 4 little corners here. And then I just take and I just kind of quickly cut those corners out, and I don't quite go all the way in. I try and go close to the corner, but I don't want to go past it, so you have to be careful not to do that. And then I go back and trim them again. So I just quick cut those corners out. And then I fold in my side and line your scissors up right up against that corner, and you get a nice clean cut. You can see I've got a little bit of a sliver of paper there, but when I go to cut this one, I'm going to cut that off. So I'm just giving all of those a slight angle, and I usually take and turn it and fold each one down, and then I flip it over and fold each flap down and cut the opposing one, And then you've got a nice angle on all four corners. Okay, so then I like to take some score tape again, and you can make it go all the way to the end. I just use a little bit just to help hold. So the reason I use this is it helps to hold while my wet adhesive is drying, and it keeps everything in place. So I just put it on the outside edge, and then you want to be sure to burnish all of that down as well to make sure that's got good adhesion to your paper. And then I start lifting. I pull in my art glitter glue, and I like to do a kind of a generous amount right up next to the chipboard, and then I fold this up with my burnishing tool and get it nice and tight up against that chipboard, and then press it down. So the tape's holding that while that glue is going to dry, and then I do burnish that glue underneath there. And I don't worry about the glue squishing out so much on this back side because it's all going to get covered anyway. Try not to use too much, but I do want to make sure you get a good hold as well. So we'll do all four sides that way. Looks like I missed trimming that piece. I'll just flip that over and trim it real quick. Sure did. All right. Okay, so that is the exact step that I took to do the other cover. So now I've got both covers, front and back, covered. And then the spine piece, the paper actually gives you 1.5 inches on each side. And that is just to give you a little more adhesion for your binding. And when you cut this one, you really want to cut it at just a very, very slight angle. You don't want to cut very much of that off. And then you also only want to fold in the top and bottom flap. And you're going to leave these flaps loose. And that's how we're going to put together the cover of the book. So we'll go ahead and do that together. I pull in my scoreboard again to do that, and I do that just to help me line everything up, hopefully accurately up and down. Now I like to take my spine, and so it's already bent this direction. I actually take and fold it and bend it the other direction as well. It is hard to see kind of those lines, but you're going to take and put everything face down. So this is the outside of the book. And I run a piece of tape again to help hold everything in place while your glue dries. And I usually put it on the outside, close to the outside edge of that piece of paper. You want to be sure to burnish that down. And then I take my cover and I line up the spine, and I make sure that the cover is tight in this corner and that the spine is tight at the bottom. And then I leave about a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch between the edge of that cover and that fold. And that's where I want to have that. So Then what I do is I hold that spine in place and I pull that off, and then I take my glue and I run it about 1/4 of an inch away from that fold. And then I go ahead and add glue to the rest of it. And I use a generous amount of glue there as well. And then I can pull that cover right back in, and I get it tight up against the top and tight at the bottom, and then I set it down, and it should be in the same place it was before. And then I usually flip it over and burnish that really good again. And then I also like to fold it over. And you want to be careful when you do that so that that doesn't pop loose. But I usually fold it over and apply quite a bit of pressure to it. And your art glitter glue usually dries fairly quickly. So you can see I've got just that little bit sticking past. And so that's how that's going to look once that folds. So then I just repeat that process. When you do bigger albums, it's a little tougher to get it to fit on the board, but for this size it works really nice. So again, I get my spine set up about the same distance as it is on the other side from that fold to the edge of that covered chipboard. Hold it in place, being sure not to move that. And then placing your glue about 1/4 of an inch away from that fold. And I am right-handed, so this is always a little bit of a challenge for me when I do this left-handed. So apply your glue, and then you should be able to bring that cover back in, tight up at the top, tight at the bottom, and lay it in place. Grab your burnishing tool, apply a fair amount of pressure, flip it over, and do the same. And then again, I do like to fold it again and apply that pressure again. And if you've lined everything up really good, when you fold that over, it should, be even. These should be the same. I'm ever so, not sure you can even see, ever so slightly off. But that's not enough to be worried about. Like if you were off quite a bit more than that, you might want to pull that up and try placing that again. But I'm happy with that. That's going to work good. So there you've got your cover. Okay. So next, you want to cover the inside of this. Now on my bigger albums that I do, I just usually cut a piece, that would end somewhere right out here. But being as this is such a small little book, you can cover this with one piece of paper. So the cover itself measures 6 inches tall. So I would cut a piece of paper that's 5 7/8. And then I will give you what my measurement comes out to, but I would wait to cut this piece until you actually have this put together. Because depending on how far apart you go here, it's going to affect the overall length of paper that you need. And that's why I didn't pre-cut this piece as well. I pre-cut it for the height, but I did not for the length. So once mine is put together, and I'm going to pull it in probably a 1/16 on each end. So I want my piece to measure 9, or I'm going to pull it in an 1/8 on each end, I guess. I'm going to cut this at 9 1/8. And then before putting that down, you want to actually just test that. Make sure you're not overhanging on either side or at the top or the bottom. And then for this piece, I also like to use the tape. If you use a wet adhesive, you can end up with some bubbles in it and everything not sticking quite the way you want it to. So I like to use this double-sided tape for this application. And you can kind of watch how I do mine. I like to keep these little mats from the Dollar Tree on hand, and I use them to do my cutting. I know I can cut on my main piece here that I have on my desk, but that's my work surface I use all the time, so I really don't tend to cut on it all the time. All right, and I'm gonna put another piece on there and just trim it to fit. And then we're just gonna kind of piece together this last little bit. You want to be real careful not to cut your paper. And I just line my blade up right along the edge of the paper. There we go. And then once you have that on there, you're going to want to take and burnish that down real good. Get out any air bubbles that could potentially be in there. All right, and then that is ready to put down. I better stick my pin in my glue so it doesn't dry out. Okay, so we're gonna pull off all of those backings. And then we're going to go ahead and put that in place, and then that's going to cover up your spine and then also give you a nice clean finish along the inside. So again, you want to just really try and center that top to bottom, side to side, as close as possible. And then once you get it set, you're going to take and burnish again and get a nice secure adhesion there. Okay, and once you have that done, then I take my tool, or you can take a straight edge, and then I slightly start to bend this up, and then I work on this crease because you're going to need this to fold, but you want to manipulate that paper and the fibers in that paper so that they will fold for you. And you're going to want to do that on both sides. And this is another area you want to be careful how you do that, because once you do that and you fold that over, you still want this to line up. If you tend to go at this crooked, which I have done before, this will get really off. So you want to kind of check as you're going to see if you are lined up. And it looks like I am. So you can really manipulate that paper to bend both ways. So there is the cover. to your album. Now, one thing I tend to always forget is to add my ribbon closure. So I like to write ribbon and put an arrow on there so that before I cover this with paper, I make sure my ribbon is in place. Or if I'm going to use a different closure, magnets, or some sort of flap, or whatever I'm going to use, I tend to try and make myself a note because I get caught up in everything else and forget to do that. So that is one thing that I generally like to make myself a note for. All right, so now we're ready to work on the spine. So for your spine piece, you need a piece of paper that measures 5 3/4 by 2.5. And I've already pre-scored mine, but I'm just going to bring my board up here to show you. And I like to set my board sideways. I find it easier to score. I have a hard time going up and down and keeping the paper in there and keeping my score in the right line. So I turn it this way. It works better for me. So with the 2.5 at the top, you're going to score at every 1/2 inch. So you're going to score at 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2. And now I'm just scoring it the opposite direction that I'd already done that. That'll help it to fold a little easier. And this, you're going to want to make sure you keep everything straight. This is really going to, your fan folds, you want to make sure you get your score lines folded exactly in place. That's going to help keep everything nice and straight. So you're going to fold your first line and then you're going to fan fold it and go the opposite direction. And you're going to fold that next one and you're going to burnish it. So then you've got a nice little mountain here. Now we want to keep this flat little valley. And this is what's going to glue into the book to hold your binding in place. So now we're going to fold up. This one's going to stay flat. That next line, we're going to fold it up. I'm going to unfold that and flatten it out so that I can fold this next piece. You're going to fold that one up. And then that last one, you're going to fold over. So what you end up with is your spine should look like that once it's folded. Okay, and then we're going to glue these together. Those little mountains need to be glued together. That's your binding. So I like to take and run a bead of glue right at that joint, right at the fold. And then I just come out and run another bead and then kind of one down the center. And then fold it over. And I burnish it good, and you're going to have all that extra glue that pops out of there. I obviously used way too much glue. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing on this one. Maybe a little less glue. All right. And you want to be sure to keep your fold. And I'm pressing pretty hard, so it is, squishing out any excess glue. All right. So now with all of that burnishing, I have flattened that back out. And all you want to do is bend that back up. So there is your spine piece. All right, now we're going to get our 2 base pages ready. So you've got 2 main pages for the book. So for that, you are going to need, let's see, 2 pieces of paper that measure 8 by 5 3/4. So your spine measures 5 3/4, your page is going to measure 5 3/4. And the reason you do that is so that your pages will stay inside of your book. So you can kind of see here, there's that 1/8 of an inch at the top and bottom. If you make them the same exact size and you get off ever so slightly with your book, your pages are going to be sticking out either the top or the bottom, and you don't want to have that. So you want to go just slightly smaller. So I go 1/4 of an inch smaller. So again, we are 5 3/4 by 8 inches. I'm just going to double check that. Perfect. And then we are going to bring the scoreboard in again. And you're going to score your page at 4. So with your 8 across the top, you're going to score it at 4. And you're going to do that to both pages. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and fold those over. I'm going to fold my writing to the inside. And you just want to make sure when you fold those over that, you know, you are lined up good and everything's nice and tight and square. So those are your first 2 pages. Now, before we get any further on building pages, well, I'm gonna backtrack just a little bit. So in the book here, we've got the flaps that go up and down. And that is one thing that I did not pre-cut. So we will cut all of that together, it looks like. Yep, we will cut all that together. I do have these pieces here for the band pre-cut, however. So you could get those cut and ready. And let's go ahead and do that. So for the band, let's set this aside for a second. Here's our 2 pages. For our bands, that's for band number 1. Oh, I have those pre-done. Band 1, band 2. So you need 4 pieces of cardstock that measure 2 by 4. So we're 2 inches, 2 inches by 4 inches. And we're going to pull in our scoreboard again. And with the 4 inches across the top, we're going to score all 4 pieces at the 1/2 inch. All right. So those are ready to go. Just kind of want to get all the scoring out of the way, and then we can put the scoreboard away and move on to assembling. So then for the little band that wraps around, I didn't pre-score that. What I ended up actually doing was, once I had it covered in paper and everything, I just took and folded it around there, and then that worked just fine for me. So if you want to score it, you can score it. I'm going to wait and wrap it around. But I have 2 pieces that measure 1 1/4 by 4 1/8. So now those are scored and ready to go. I'm going to clip those together and set those to the side. And then our little fold out page, we're going to do that because I have that pre-cut. Our little fold out page. This So this is actually part of the original page right here. And then we're going to add this onto it. And what we need to be able to do that is we need a piece of paper that measures 4.5 by 8 1/4. I want to measure that. I think that's wrong. Yeah, we want that to measure 4 3/4. 4 3/4. Oh, that was my score mark. Okay. Back it up. We need the piece of paper to measure 5 3/4 by 12. So 5 3/4 by 12 is our piece of paper. Okay. Then we're going to score it. And now I better measure because I erased my note. We are going to four and a half. Okay. We're going to score this at 3/4 of an inch. And then again at 4.5. And then again at 8 1/4. Now, because I kind of messed up myself, I'm going to just fold this all and make sure that this works out. So normally you would just use a 1/2 inch to attach to the page, but rather than trim that little quarter off, I just left it on. So we'll have 3/4 of an inch to be able to attach. If you want to trim it, feel free to do so. If you're used to building and using just a 1/2 inch. We're going to fold that one over, and then we're going to fan fold and fold this one this way. Okay, so you can see how that folds. Here's our original page. We're going to end up gluing this right on the end of the page, and that'll be our little fan fold that comes out, our accordion. So you're going to want 2 of these. So we're going to go ahead and double check the measurements on this one and see if this one's ready to go at 5 3/4 by 12, which it is. And then we'll bring the scoreboard back in again, and we're going to score it at 3/4 of an inch. And again at 4.5. And at 8 1/4. Okay, and then let's go ahead and fold this one as well and get it ready to go. And you want to make sure and keep your folds nice and straight so that your edges line up. If they start to get off, you know that your folding is getting off, and you want to try and straighten that back out. All right, so that one's ready to go as well. Okay, so our original pages, our backside flaps for both of those. And now we want to cut the inside flaps. Okay, so I grabbed another piece of cardstock. Apparently I was tired and went to bed before I had this all done. All wrote down. So let's just measure these flaps together. So these flaps are 3 7/8 wide, and then this first one is gonna be, lift that up so I can see where the paper actually ends, is gonna be 6 1/4. So we're gonna go ahead and cut our paper at 3 7/8 wide. we're going to start with that. Three and 7/8. And then 6 1/4. This is your top flap, and this cutoff piece, which is going to be 5 3/4, is going to be your bottom flap that flips up. So we're going to go ahead and measure 3 7/8 again. And 6 1/4. And then we've got our cutoff piece. That's going to be the bottom flap. So we've got our flaps for both the front page and then the second page. We're going to bring our trimmer in again, or our scoreboard in again. And we're going to line it up with the 5 3/4 at the top. And you're going to score it at a 1/2 inch. And then you're going to take the piece that measures 6 1/4 at the top, and you're going to score that at a 1/2 inch. And you're going to do that to all 4 pieces. And now all of our flaps are ready to go. Okay, so now the big debate is, and I've done this both ways and struggled, so it's totally up to you how you do it. You could take and put down your pretty patterned paper before putting your book together. Sometimes it makes it a little easier for burnishing. I always get confused and end up putting something on wrong, so I don't generally go that route. I will assemble my book first, because then I don't end up putting pattern paper on upside down or anything like that. So let's assemble our book, and then I think what I'm going to do is do the decorating and put the pattern paper down and just do a quick speed video at the end of that to show how that all goes together. So the first thing that you need to do, though, before we start doing anything, is I like to have patterned paper behind the spine piece. So we need to pick some paper and cut a strip to put behind the spine piece. And for this book today, I'm going to be using the Retro Summer collection by Simple Stories. So I just need to find a piece to use to do the spine with. And I always hate to do that and cut into a big piece just to do the spine, but we got to start somewhere. So let's see this. I haven't even opened this and looked at it yet. It's sure a fun summer print. Now, the other thing I like to do, just as a caution to you all, before I start cutting into this, I really like to kind of think about what I want to do for my cover. So like think about which patterned paper I might be wanting to save to do my cover with. Now this album is small enough that one sheet is all you're going to need to do that cover. So the tags, obviously, I'm going to save those tags and put some tags in the pockets and stuff. So I'm going to set that one aside. Also, the journaling bits and cut aparts, I feel like I'm going to want to use those as well. I do like that patterned paper on the back. However, I think I'm going to try and save most of those to be able to use in the book. And the 3x4 cut aparts, oh, I like the back too. I think I'm going to just set that one aside as well. Oh my gosh, look at those, the 4x4 cut aparts. Oh my gosh, I love those. We are going to save those for sure. I'm going to be using some of those. And then we've got the 4x6 cut aparts. So I could actually see this on the cover. Could even see this if you trim it down. I think that'd trim down enough. Oh boy, yeah, 4x6. So you'd have to trim it right on both sides of the summer. So I definitely want to utilize that too. So I'm going to set that aside to save as well. So that leaves the rest of this to be able to use for all the fun decorating inside the book. Now, the cover. I envision, and we'll see how this works out, I envision maybe using this as the cover and using this top part. So the book measures 6 inches. That would come down to here. So you would have this wrapped all the way around the outside of the book. And then using this on the cover. So we're going to set that sheet aside to utilize on the cover. All right. So that really kind of narrowed down the pieces that I've got to use for the decorating of the pages and the inside spine. Ooh, that's a fun piece too. All right, so I think I'm going to use these brown sprinkles to cover the spine with. Set all those aside. Then the question becomes, I did matte and do a little layering on the front cover and the back and the spine. I did not do that on the inside. This is pretty narrow. It's a lot to have to layer. I am only going to do the single layer again. So with that being said, now I would double check. You've got 1 inch there. So I'm going to trim this paper down to 7/8. And because this is directional, I don't think it really matters, but I am going to cut it in this direction. And I'm going to cut it at 7/8. And we're 6 inches long here, so I'm going to cut that at 5 7/8. And then I'm going to kind of test that, make sure it's going to cover and fit well, and it is. And then if you follow me at all, follow any of my tutorials, any of my Scrappin' Saturday series, I like to ink everything. So this will be no different, and I am going to use Vintage Photo on here. I think it is a better choice than the black. It'll just kind of finish off like the edge of this brown piece. You can't notice it a lot, but it does get rid of that white edge, which I definitely like to do. So there's our spine piece, inked and ready to go. And we're just going to glue that in place. So when I put my glue, I like to just go along that outer edge and then kind of squiggle down the middle. You don't want to use too much glue and have it squishing out. Okay, that is the outside. This is the inside. Double check that. Lay that down. Try and get it centered side to side, top to bottom. And you probably can't see it on camera, but when you're doing it yourself, you can see your folds to line that up. Then you want to burnish it, and your spine piece is in place. Now we're going to go ahead and glue that spine in. So I just take and hold those two spine pieces and then run my glue on that spine, and that's where you do want to be kind of generous. And then your spine is 1/4 of an inch shorter than your book is. So you want to try and get that lined up side to side, top to bottom, as good as possible. Then I fold one side down, give it a really good tight burnish, and I fold that one over and the next one over, holding it down all the while because your glue is not dry, and when you fold that down it will give and lift, and then you're gonna be moving that around, so you want to keep a hold of that. And then I just go back and forth and keep repeating that until I feel like that glue is dry. And that way you have done two things. You've secured your glue and your spine while that's drying, and then you've also loosened up your pages of your spine to fold back and forth easily. So there is your spine. Now, because I wrote in the middle of that, I'm not going to probably get that all the way covered, so I want to just get that erased. To be sure none of that is going to show. Okay, so there you go. Now, if this were directional, we'd really want to pay attention to how we're putting our pages on. It's not directional. I do have my note written right there. Okay, let's grab our pages. And let's see, my pages in this little stack. Yeah, so your main base pages are going to be your pieces that measure 8 by 5 7/8, and then they're scored at the 4-inch mark. So you've got 2 of those. We're going to go ahead and put those on. Now when I put mine on, I have to turn it towards me sideways, and we're going to leave the top open for a pocket. So to do that, you're going to want to run a bead of glue along the bottom and then on both sides, and just a real thin bead of glue. And then you're going to come in and put that down on either side of that first binding that's sticking up, and you want to be sure to line that up on there and lay that page down and make sure you're straight with your book both ways, and then burnish that down. Okay, so there's your first page and your pocket at the top. Okay, then you're just going to repeat that process. You're going to repeat that process for your second one. Now this one gets a little trickier because when you fold it over, I'm going to do it before I put glue on it. When you fold it over, you want to make sure you're lined up with that other page. You can tell immediately when you're off. So getting your first one on straight is really important so that when you put your second one on, you're staying straight. If you start off a little bit off with your first one, it's going to throw your second one even further off. So real important that you try and get that lined up as straight as possible when you do that. Okay, so we're just going to slip that on both sides, and I'm going to just gently place it and then flip it over and test it. I'm going to press it down a little bit, flip it over this way and test it, make sure we're lined up straight, and we are good to go. And then burnish that really good again. See how easily your pages turn? Make sure your pockets at the top. So both pockets are at the top. Okay? There, we've got the basic part of the book done. Now, I think we're going to go ahead and put in our accordion page. Now, like I mentioned before, if you want to trim that down to a 1/2 inch, feel free to do that. What we're going to do is attach it to the back side of our first page. And so you're going to want to fold that over and just glue that right there. Now my flap looks like I measured it. I either cut my pages just a smidge long or cut these a smidge short. However, that's fine. If you do the same thing that I did, just center it between there. So you've got the same distance top to bottom rather than a wider gap at one end. And then it looks like you meant to do that. I'm not going to recut this to get it at the same size. I'm just going to center it and it will work just fine. So a generous amount of glue on that tab. And then you're just going to put it on the back side of that first page. And you want to line up that fold. Make sure that you're even, if you cut everything properly, even top to bottom. And then go ahead and open that up and burnish it. So there's the back side of page 1. We're going to do the same thing on the back side of page 2. And it looks like I cut them both the same. I bet my pages got cut a little bit too big. They did, I noticed when I put my binding on, put them on the binding that they were just a tad longer than the binding. So I have a feeling I might have cut my pages just a little sliver off. Okay. And because my writing is so close to the edge, again, see, I'm learning a few lessons about making myself notes on the paper. Don't do them so close to where you're going to score. I'm just going to erase at the edge because that's the only thing that could potentially show. The rest of this is going to get covered up with pattern paper. I'm going to burnish that again real good. So we've got page 1 and page 2. Back sides are done. All right, so let's do our flaps on the front side. So you want one of the longer ones and one of the shorter ones for both the first page and the second page. We're going to go ahead and fold our scores and burnish them nice and tight so they'll lay flat. Get a nice good crease in them. And then you want to check, and your longer one is going to be your top one. Okay, so I'm going to take the longer one and do it first, and it's going to be at the top. But for me to do that, I have to turn it around. So I'm working upside down, so don't get confused and think I'm working on the bottom. And then we're going to go ahead and glue that. I just have to do this to line it up. It just is the way I have to work. And then when you're putting that down, you want to make sure your paper lines up with the edge there as well. And give it a good burnish. Get a hold of it and flip it up. And then we'll flip the book back around so that tab flips up. And then we're going to take our shorter one and we're going to attach it at the bottom. And same thing, you want to be sure that that is lined up at the bottom. Your crease is lined up good, your edge is lined up good, and then once that is, give it a good burnish. My corner's not sticking up on that one. There we go. Just need it burnished a little bit more. There we go. Now, you can do this before you adhere these if you want to. but I did round the corners on the other album, and I want to round the corners again. And I would recommend actually clipping those corners before hooking everything down. And the only reason I say that is if you're like me and you screw up your corner, you can recut a new tab if you need to. So let's go ahead and do that the second time around. Let's round those corners first. That way we won't have any mistakes once we already have them hooked down in the book. Okay, so we're on the front side of page 2. We're going to take that longer one and we're going to glue it down. And again, I'm turning my work surface up, my book upside down to install that. Adding my glue. Lining it up at the top really good. Making sure my edge is lined up. And then giving that a good burnish. Okay, and then we're gonna install the bottom flap. So you want to fold that over, give that fold a good, nice tight fold. Attach your glue and line it up at the bottom. Make sure your sides are lined up and give it a good burnish again. All right. So we've got all of our pages in. Now our little accordion, I'm going to go back and hit those corners as well. There's the first one. And the second one, let's hit that one. All right. Now, before we go to any new sections, we're going to go back to this accordion. So I want to attach all the magnets next. So I'm going to pull my book in here and show you. When I originally did this, I did not put a magnet here. However, once I got all of my pattern paper on here, this magnet wasn't holding to here. So I ended up adding a magnet. So we're going to go ahead and just put all 4 magnets down now. And to do that, we're going to want to see where we want this magnet on the base part to land. That's going to be the most important one because we don't want it to fall outside of this folded area. So the magnets I'm using don't have adhesive on them already. I found these on Amazon. I'll link them below. I actually really like them. They're a nice thin magnet. So I'm going to want that not only to fall inside of there, but also not to fall right on the edge of this fold either. I want it to go in a little ways. So we're going to set that one first. You can measure and get it exact if you want. I'm just going to go in about 1/2 inch from the end. And what that does is allows that paper that you're going to put over top of that enough room to be able to burnish that down and not have that lifted up where that magnet is. Now, to find the placement of this magnet, what I have found works for me is I stick a magnet on there. I stick a dot of glue on there, not very much, and I flip that over. Now your magnet's not going to stay there, but your glue dot is there and shows you exactly where that magnet needs to land. So there's a little bit of glue on there, but I'm also going to take some score tape and hook that down. Now I utilize that same trick for this side. Now that one is held in place by that magnet. Whoops. So double check that that's folding good. Put a little dot of glue on there. Fold that piece of paper over. And you've got your glue dot the size of the magnet to show you exactly where that magnet needs to land. Tape it down to hold it in place. And now we need to get this one in place. So we're going to, well, it didn't lift. That's all right. We'll hook it there, put a dot of glue on it, and flip it over. And there we go. It's stuck. Let's add a little tape to hold it down. Now you have all of your magnets in place and they line up perfectly. So let's go ahead and repeat that process one more time. If you didn't quite catch that the first time, we'll do it again here. So I'm going to line it up on this edge first, and then that'll properly place it where I want it over here. And for the first magnet, I'm just going to hook it down with some score tape. Again, if you want to measure and make sure you're right in the center, feel free. I'm eyeballing it. It's close enough. No, I guess I'm off quite a ways. Let's maybe move that. I thought I was close enough. We'll move it up. Apparently eyeballing isn't working for me. Maybe you should measure. Let's see. All right, there's center. Oh, maybe I wasn't as far off as I thought. Okay, so I am in the roughly that, I'm in about a ½ inch. You stick your dot of glue on there. Stick your magnet on there first. Stick your dot of glue on that magnet. Hook it down. There's where that magnet belongs. I'm going to tape it down to make sure it stays. We're going to flip this over and let that magnet catch the one from the other side. There we go. And we'll tape that in place. Put an extra one down, dot of glue, fold over your paper. Got our glue dot as our reference for where that goes. And then we'll tape that one down. So now we've got all of our magnets in place. All right. Let's see. So my front flaps off just slightly. All right. And then we've got this middle binding here, or middle piece here. We want to cover that as well. So we had cut, here's what's left from our cut from doing our spine, and we're going to go ahead and use that here as well. So we need this to measure just slightly less than a half. So let's see if we can do that with this. I'm not sure. No, I'm going to get a different trimmer. pull in this trimmer. And let's just cut that off. And we'll get a piece that measures just a little less than a half. And you do want to test that before you glue that down. You want to make sure that that's going to fit in there. I do need to cut it for height still, but it fits perfectly in between the two pages. It's not going to catch on anything. So I could measure it. I'm just going to mark it. All right, and then that is perfect. So now we'll take and ink this little strip. Not going to see much of it. I'm not sure inking is necessary, but of course I'm going to ink it anyway. And we're going to glue that down. Press that down good. Okay, now we're going to do our little piece here. I don't think I have anything prepared for that. So this is just one of the cutoff pieces. And it measures 4 1/4. I think the one I put in this first book measured 4. I'm going to leave this at 4 1/4. We're just going to go with the 4 1/4. That's going to work good. And I'm going to pull in our scoreboard. And we're going to score this. Get this out of the way. We're going to score this at this measures 4 1/4. So let's score this at 4 1/4 so that we've got a square. And then we're going to just go ahead and score this at 1/8. All right, and then for an easy way to do it, we're going to go at, from that last score line, we want this one to measure 4 1/4 too. So let's see, 8 5/8 is what your overall length is going to be, okay? So you've got the 2 score lines, and we're going to cut that off at 8 5/8. Go this direction so I can see my mark. And I mark that because I'm using this trimmer that does not go out far enough. I could use a different trimmer, but this one's handy. And then you're going to fold and burnish on those score lines. And this one is more challenging to fold with such a small little gap between the two of them. So you want to make sure you do get your paper lined up good, and you're going to fold and burnish that. So you've got that little 1/8 inch there. And then you're going to pull your book back in. Okay, so that is right side up. Before we do that, we're going to round these corners. Be easier to do now before installing. And we're going to run just a little bead of glue down that. It's about as wide as my glue tip is with all the extra glue on it right now. Then I'm going to turn it to the side and eyeball top to bottom. And try and eyeball the side to side. Looks ever so crooked. There we go. And keep that in place. And burnish it down. This piece is a bit of a challenge to get in straight and get it burnished down. So if your base paper is off and not installed perfectly, this is where you're going to just see, but most people are not going to notice that. And then I just open it up and go down the middle as well. All right. Now, the last thing we have to do is our inside pocket, inside cover pocket. And other than that, we've got the bases for the book built. So I'm probably not going to follow this one exactly. I know that I do have a piece cut. I know that I just used a cutoff piece for this. I'm not going to cut a new piece, and I don't think you should either. I'm pretty sure this one might be a little shorter. No, I think it's right. All right, so I've got a piece of paper here that cardstock that measures 5 by 4. And you're going to pull your scoreboard in. And with the 5 across the top, get in camera here for you. Okay, with the 5 across the top, we're going to score at a 1/2 inch. We're going to turn it with the 4 across the top. We're going to score at the 1/2 inch again. We're going to turn it with the 5 across the top again and score it at the 1/2 inch. So you've scored that on 3 sides. Now you're going to fold and burnish all 3 sides, and you want a nice tight fold there, so make sure it's burnished really well. Okay, and then you're going to take your scissors and we're going to cut at a diagonal across that bottom corner, across both of those. Okay, so there would be a nice straight pocket, but I'm going to grab my cutter and we're going to angle this across. So when I did my last pocket, I actually lined up on this first line on my cutter, and I lined this corner up and I lined this bottom corner up. I'll give you a measurement once I do that. I didn't measure to do this. This is how I actually cut it. Line that corner up and line this corner up, and then I cut. So you could measure in 1 inch and measure up 1 inch and line those marks up and cut. That's going to give you the same thing. 1 inch in, 1 inch up. So then I actually take and at just a slight angle trim this piece. Not much to attach. And then I also trim this one at a slight angle as well. For some reason this doesn't look right. Nope, it is right. Okay. It's a little bit. Let's see. Let's fold that. Nope, that's perfect. Okay, so we're going to attach the bottom. I like to attach the bottom first. Fold everything in. Line it up at the bottom edge and at this outside edge. Make sure it's nice and straight. It looks like we have a big gap here, but we really don't once the book folds up. Okay. So we're going to burnish that bottom piece down. And then we're going to start doing our decorating. So I would cut this base piece to fit right inside of this piece. Okay, and then I would fold this pocket up. So I'm not going to glue the rest of the pocket up. I'm going to leave it with just the bottom. And then I'm going to cut my patterned cardstock to fit inside of there and go up and then glue this down on top of it. Or what I want to happen is I want these two tabs to go underneath the pattern paper. So I would cut the pattern paper, slide it in here, put all my glue down, and then fold everything over. And let's see if I can show you. I would make sure my pattern paper is like that. And I would glue it in here and fold it up. I will be taping the decorating so you can kind of see how I do that piece when I record that part of it. But for now, we've got the base of the album made. Now this is where I would pick my ribbon. I would find a ribbon that coordinates with this and attach the ribbon to the outside. So I'm going to grab some ribbon and we'll go ahead and do that together as well. Okay, so I pulled these 3 colors of ribbon and I took my paper over to my ribbon to pick those colors. And I thought that those colors were nice and summery and matched the paper well. So now when I do my ribbon, I'm just going to give you a little trick that I have started doing, because I used to just hook these together just like this, get my ends together, cut them, line them up, and tape them down. But I found that if I was using 3 ribbons, I could pull that 3rd ribbon, that middle one, out fairly easily. So now before I do any of that, I actually take and glue my 3 ribbons together, and I don't worry quite so much about having them exactly lined up. I mean, this one is, but if they're off just a little bit, then it seems to be less of a lump right where that ribbon is, if you kind of vary the lengths of those. But I do glue those all together, because that way you're not, when pulling on this later on, you're not going to pull that middle ribbon loose, which is something I have done in the past. So just a little hint or trick for you. So this I do want to kind of try and get lined up as close to the center as possible. You could probably eyeball it. And I'm just going to go ahead and tape that down for now. And now I've got, I know this is a little long. Actually, it's really long, which is fine. But I'll take these 3 ends. I didn't get them cut quite the same. And we'll glue those together as well. Just to make sure nothing comes loose. And we can line that up from the other side. And use a little tape. Okay. And now that this is all done, I am seeing a small problem. That's why I should stick to the original and not change. Our center right here. We went 4 1/4 long. We're going to need to trim that. Our book is only 4 inches. Those pages are sticking out. So we're going to want to fix that. and trim that 1/4 of an inch off and make those the 4 inches. So not impossible to do, but kind of a pain in the butt to do. And I'm gonna just be honest with you, we're not gonna measure. I'm just gonna trim a little bit off. And all you wanna do is make sure you've got that straight in there. Hold that down. And we're gonna trim that off. There we go. Now it's inside the book. Okay, so then we'll go back. I should have known not to veer off of my original, that there was a reason it was the size it was. So I'll make a notation of that in the part of the video where we're actually doing that. So hopefully nobody else has to actually trim that like I just did. But it all works out. Okay, and those actually do measure the same. They just end up a little bit different when they fold. All right. So now you're ready to do your decorating. And you can go ahead and cut these. I just like to kind of try and find the center and trim. And I leave them long until I'm done. And then when I'm done, you'll see at the end, I do tie it in the bow and then tie knots in the ends to help with the raveling or unraveling of it. So I will decorate on video, on camera for you, but it will be sped up. I'm not going to go into how I do that necessarily, except that like my cover here is 4x6, my first piece of cardstock. To cover that, I would take 1/8 of an inch off of that and do a piece that measures 3 7/8 by 5 7/8, and then go in, if I'm gonna do another layer, go into 5 3/4 by 3 3/4 for the matting. So I do everything about 1/8 of an inch smaller than what is there to give you that nice frame on everything. So I will video that, speed that up, and I'll see you at the end of the video. All right, I almost forgot. We have one more thing before we move on to the decorating. And that is the tabs, the little tab with the slider to hold down this tilt up and this flip down here. So we want to hook those down before we put our patterned paper on so that our little tabs are covered. So we've got 4 pieces that measure 2 by 4, and they are scored at the 1 inch. And we just want to fold those. And we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm going to turn it sideways. And we're going to glue down that little tab. And we're just going to eyeball the center of this and get it as lined up with the edge. And it looks like it might be just a tad high. Get that on there straight. And then I'm going to turn it and do the other one. And I'm just going to line that up with the other tab coming across and get that on the outside edge of that. Make sure those are lined up perfectly. and then burnish that tab down. Okay, now we'll go ahead and fold all that up, and then we'll do the same thing on this second page. And you want to just burnish that fold down so it's nice and crisp and clean fold there. And we're going to glue the first one down along the outside edge there. Burnish it. And then go ahead, get the other one lined up. Match that up. And burnish those edges. And I did round those corners, which we should have done before installing it, but that is fine. We can still round those corners with it all attached in there. So just take your corner rounder. I'm doing all the right side, and then I'm going to flip these around and do the opposing side. Now we are ready to decorate. Okay. Let's fold our little flaps in, fold that over. Looks like I might have installed that one in a little tight. So if you happen to do the same thing, you can just try and bend that fold out a little bit. There we go. All I did was push that fold out just a little bit so that it would fold down. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and leave the two little slides until we get those decorated, because we'll just fold those all at once. Okay, I thought I'd give you guys a final walkthrough of the album all completed and decorated. So I did kind of speed that up so you could kind of watch how that process went a little bit, but I'll explain a couple things. So on the front cover, I did actually take and use some glossy accents on the chocolate on the cone and kind of on all the highlights of the ice cream. And then also, I'm not sure if you can see it, but on the little indents on the cone itself, on the sugar cone, I used the glossy accents there as well. I also added them to all of the sprinkles on the ice cream in the background. I did lift the ice cream cone on some foam tape, added a sticker to the spine, and left the back blank. And then we've got our pretty ribbon closure here holding this shut. It is a pretty full album already, so you're definitely going to need that. On the inside pocket, I did use one of the stickers from the sticker sheet, as well as a couple of the words. It says ice cream, and then I scream, you scream. And then I did put a couple tags inside the pocket, and I absolutely love these little 4x4 cut aparts. They're a little bit big, so they're just kind of sitting inside there, but I thought they were super cute. The tags in this collection are a lot of fun as well. Some great spots for journaling throughout the book if you need them. I did use one of the 2x2 cut aparts and added it to the slider. Now my legs are a little long holding this shut. You could shorten them if you decided you wanted to. I left them the same length because that's what they were in the original album that I showed. I did add a sticker to the inside of one of them, a sticker to the inside of the slider because my paper ran just a touch short, so that kind of hid that. I do have the fold outs, each have some stickers on them as well from the sticker sheet, just some of the words: beach ball, orange sherbet, and on the back side of page 1, we've got the pull out here, and I do have one of the word stickers. I have like the pink lemonade die cut used here. And then on the inside, I used another 2x2 cut apart here as a tuck spot. Tucked a couple of the cute little tags inside there. And then I didn't add anything to these because these are super busy papers. And then I've got the ice cream cone 2x2 cut apart on this section. Did add a couple of the stickers here. And then the flip ups each have a couple stickers. I've got community pool, lifeguard on duty, and let's get that slid over there. And then on the next little accordion fold, I did use another one of the 2x2 cut aparts, added a couple more tags to it. Again, great journaling spots. You could tuck photo mats in there if you wanted to. On the back side here, I did use the pool floaty, and I believe, yep, I made that as a tuck spot as well, so you could easily either grab one of those tags and slide it over here, or put a photo mat there as well. The back is blank, again, because I already have this album pretty full. I didn't want to add any more bulk to it, because once you add those photos to it, you're definitely going to want to have this tie closure to keep that shut. Otherwise, we're going to kind of have a open alligator type book. But the closure ribbon helps keep everything nice and neat. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do. Every Saturday, I come to you with my Scrappin' Saturday series and bring you either a 1-page or a 2-page 12x12 scrapbook layout. And I hope to be doing a few more tutorials for you this summer. I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.